Hey guys, Joe from SimVRlabs here. I wanted to give you guys a tutorial on scripting, and specifically for this one it's going to be a quick little tutorial on XLUA. And caveat, I've only been doing this for about a year, so I still have a lot to learn. However, if you've been following along, you've seen that I've been able to do some pretty neat things, and so that's what this is about. This isn't about the most efficient way to do it or the most correct way to do it. This is just about scripting a little bit in Lua and getting things done in XPlan, right? So we're going to use XLUA this time. It's probably the easiest one to script in. It's the most intuitive. However, it's not the most flexible, and it's not the most, you can't do the most complex things, but you could do quite a bit with it, and it's very, very, very lightweight, and it just works really well in XPlan. So let's get to it. So what I want to do is, first of all, I want to get just write a little script for setting your position when the flight starts in the 172. So we want to start with the door open. And I'm going to say we want to start outside the aircraft as if you're walking up to it, right? So let's put ourselves where we want to go, right? So say we want to start in this position, okay? We want to start in that position when we start in the aircraft. Now, how do we do that? Well, first of all, XPlan uses datarefs, and datarefs are number values based on things that are happening in the sim. So your position is defined by your head position, your pilot head position. So right now my pilot head position is not in the aircraft anymore. It's your pilot head position relative to the aircraft's center of gravity. So there are numbers associated with that. There are also numbers associated with this door being opened or being closed. There's a dataref for the door, okay? So we need to find out what all those things are, right? So let's get back in the aircraft here. And I use datareftool, and I recommend you do the same. So if you don't have it, you're going to want to get it. And you can view the datarefs, and down here, this little green button, DAT, means the datarefs. If I click on it again, that's the commands. We're not going to mess with commands today. We're just going to mess with datarefs. And I want to find out what dataref this door is on, right? So one way to do it is I can manipulate the door, and then I can look for the blue things. So basically, when you change something in XPlan, anything that's changing turns blue until about 10 seconds. Then it starts fading into white. Now, I already know that this particular dataref is under Sim Cockpit 2 switches. So Sim Cockpit 2 and switches. And if I operate it, you'll see there it is. See how it turned blue? And it's eventually going to start fading back into white. And so that's one way to find, if you don't know what it is or where it's at, that's one way to find it. That's kind of the hard way, but it's a way of doing it. So I can highlight that, right? And I could copy that. I could copy this dataref because that's the dataref we want to manipulate the door. So we're going to be writing our Lua script today in ZeroBrain, and we will be writing all of our Lua scripts in ZeroBrain because it's awesome. So anything with XLUA, Fly with Lua, SASL, Gizmo, anything we do in any kind of those Lua, different Lua environments, we're going to use ZeroBrain. You can use it Windows, Mac, whatever. Okay. So I'm just going to paste that, right? We're not actually writing code right now. We're just getting information about the things we want to manipulate. So if I look here, I can see there's like a, this is door open, but if you look, let's see if I can zoom in on that. Nope, I can't. There's a 10, right? So there's door open, and then there's a close bracket 10, and then there's a bunch of things after here. Well, there's actually 10 zeros there, right? which means this dataref is what's called an array dataref. There's actually 10 doors that it could open or close. Now the Cessna's only got 2, so the first one is probably the first 0. So if I change that 0 to a 1, let's see, change that 0 to a 1. Numlock 1, push enter. Yep, it opens that door. If I go and I change that 1 back to a 0, it closes it. Now, in array datarefs in Lua, they start at position 0. So that 0 right there is actually door open, close bracket 0. This next one here, the second one, would actually be close bracket 1 as far as the name of the dataref. Now that's probably going to be the Copilot door. We can check that out and verify by changing that to 1. That's Copilot door. So I know that door open, close bracket 0 is my pilot door. All right. Not all datarefs have, most of them are just 1 value at the end. They're not array datarefs, but you got to keep on the lookout for that. So that's the dataref we want to manipulate, and we want to make sure it's close bracket 0 because that's the pilot's dataref. And we can just put little notes like 1, it means, you know, open. 0 means closed, right? And go on to the next thing. The next thing we want to find out the dataref and values for is your position, right? So I can go in here, and I know under SimGraphics, I think it's view, SimGraphics view pilot head. There we go. That's what I'm looking for. Now, how do I know that, right? So I could have found that by moving around with my arrow keys and finding out what's changing, and there's several things changing. Or I could go and I could do a search. So if I go online and I just type in explain datarefs, right? I like to use these Sim Innovations, right? Sim Innovations, you can search for different datarefs, you can find the name of the dataref, whether it's writable or not. This is important. If it's not writable, you can't actually change a value and see anything happen. Nothing will happen. All it is a reading dataref. It's just for reading. So you can read and you can set up conditionals like if this one reads this, then do this to something writable. So you could do that, or you could just mess with just the writable ones. It's whatever you need to do. But you have to pay attention. You might be trying to write to a non-writable dataref, and that can get you in trouble. So I know I want to, you know, change the head position, so I can type in the description head and click search. And then there we go. We got position of pilot's head relative to the center of gravity, X, Y, and Z. So X is left and right, Y is up and down, Z is forward and backwards, and here's the datarefs we want, right? They're writable, so boom, that's exactly what we want. We want this one here, that's the X. So I'll copy that, paste it there. And then this one here is the Z. I'm going to copy that and paste it there. Now, do I want the Y? I'm thinking that default position on the Y is about here. And that's about how tall you'd be if you were standing looking at it, too. So I'm going to leave the Y alone. I'm going to let that be default. And I'm going to slide back here, and we're going to find that position that we liked. So we like this right here, right? And I'm going to look at the X. The X is 6, actually -6, right? So 0 is perfectly centered on the airplane. To the left side of the airplane is negative numbers on the X. To the right side is positive numbers. I'm on the left side, so I know it's going to be negative. So -6 is what we'll call it. So we'll actually call it a little more. Let's go 6.5. And then the Z is here, and that looks like it's about 7.8. Let's call it 8. Right? So we're just gathering our data before we actually start coding. So, what else do we want? That should pretty much do it. We want to start here, and we want the door to open when we start. So, if you want to keep this information or you want to keep any information in a Lua program, but you don't actually want it to be part of your code, you just want the information for readability or whatever, then you could comment out this line. Now, what does that mean? That means I can add a couple symbols here, and it'll make it as if it's white space as far as Xplain is concerned. As far as you're concerned, you'll still be able to read it. Now, when I do 2 dashes, you see how it grays out that line. That means that line, you know, to the computer is no longer there, but to our eyes, we can see it. That's how you comment a line. Now, I could go and I could do this one individually, and I could do this one individually, or I can do what's called block commenting, right? So say I come up here, and I'm also going to write, you know, I'm the author, and I did it on this date, and here's the credits, etc., etc. I could do double hashes on each line, or I could do it real quick by doing what's called block commenting. So it's a double hash with 2 open brackets, right? And that grays out everything. Now, leaving that 2 open brackets without adding any closed brackets anywhere will actually comment out everything, basically erase everything. So you have to define where your block comment stops. So say it stops after this 6.5, you want 2 closed brackets, right? And now that block comments all this, but then lets this be part of the code. You can see the colors change to give you an idea of what's up. So I want to go ahead and block comment all this, because I don't want any of that right there to be in the code. This is all just information. So if you look at, let's look at another XLUA script that's actually in Xplain. So all the laminar stuff has XLUA to it, right? And I could look at the C172's XLUA stuff. If you go into the aircraft folder and you go into the plugins, you'll find the XLUA folder, right? You'll see a 64, a script, and an init. The 64 and the init you never touch. Those are with every XLUA folder in Xplain, right? Scripts, though, has a bunch of different what are called modules, because they're folders with a Lua file inside it that's the exact same name as the folder, and it's all the same. So like anything capitalized in the folder has to be capitalized in the name of the file. So you'll see C172 underscore init. There's a C172 underscore init.lua inside it, right? That's exactly how it needs to be. So if you look at this, you'll see that Laminar has put some helps for you on what is what and what looks like what and what goes where. So you'll see here that they start with all the datarefs. They're basically defining, hey, these are the datarefs that we're going to use in this little program script, and these are what we're going to call them, right? So let's take this one for example. We'll just copy this and we'll paste it over to our thing, right? So this is using this dataref inside the quotes, right? That's the dataref it's using. And then this is what they're calling it, startup running. So basically for, are you starting up running or are you not, right? So we're just going to take this and we're going to use this as a template, because it's find dataref, and then it's got the, you know, we could type all this out or we could just cut and paste here. So we want door open, right? We want that dataref right there. I'm going to put it in between the quotes. And then we want to call it door underscore open, right? That's the first thing we're going to use. Now I could copy, paste that a couple more times, and put pilot head X in there and pilot head Z in there, right? And we need to call it pilot head X and pilot head Z. Now it's good to format it like this. I could also do it like, you know, door open like that with a capital O. But I always start mine with underscore the first word, and then I separate the second word either with a underscore or I'm sorry, lowercase, or an underscore or a capitalized. So for this example, we'll just do underscores. Right now, we've defined what these, so XPlan is going to look for these, and these are going to be special datarefs now in its eyes that we are going to use in the rest of our script. Okay. Now, as far as what we're going to do next is we're going to define something that happens on the flight start. Now, XLUA and Fly with Lua, all the different Luas have what are called predefined functions. Okay. So predefined functions are functions that run during certain events during XPlan. So if I look here at the Cessna's init.lua, there's a thing called function flight start, right? And this is all the stuff that it has special coded to happen when the flight starts. That's when basically the aircraft loads, right? You also have what's called function after physics. This is all the stuff that happens all the time, basically per frame. So each frame that happens, so if you're running 30 FPS, you're running 30 frames per second. So 30 times a second, physics are calculated. And after the physics are calculated before the next frame, there's other things that are calculated. So normally anything else that updates after physics. Physics are usually the first things that update. So after physics is usually your runtime code, which means your stuff that's happening all the time. If you want something to happen once, it's in function flight start. So functions are like buckets, and buckets have names, and then you throw the code into whatever bucket makes sense to throw it into. So the flight start bucket is what we want to throw this code into. So function, right? We type that out and it turns blue. Flight underscore start, and then you put an open and close parentheses. Now, in more advanced coding, there's stuff that goes into this parentheses to do some more advanced things. Those are called arguments and parameters. We're not going to get into that yet. So most of the time when you're doing this and you're doing some light scripting like we're doing, it's just going to be function flight start, open, close. Now, I'm telling it that I want something to happen at the flight start. Now, I could define these variables. So this is called a variable now, right? So I can define what I want these to be. So door open equals 1. That means the door is going to open at the flight start. Pilot, no. If you start typing, you'll see that these can autofill. Zero brain is awesome, right? So I could just hit enter. I could select which one I want with my arrow keys and just hit enter. And it'll fill that out, so I don't have to type all that out. I want that to equal, what did we say, negative 6.5, right? And then I want pilot head Z to equal, what did we say, 8? Now, a bucket has to have an end, right? So anytime you do a function has to end. So I'm going to type END. And that's it. That's my light little script, and that should set these at start. Now, say I forgot my end, and I went to run it, nothing would happen. And with XLUA, you're not going to get any kind of debugging codes in XPlan. So it just won't work. So if you do an XLUA thing and it just doesn't work, something's not right, that usually means you have something wrong with your code. So with Zero Brain, it's pretty neat. If you push the play button up here, it says you must save the program first. Okay, so we have to save this. So we want to save it, right? We have to save it as a module. So XPlan aircraft, and inside our aircraft, we want to put it in the aircraft folder that we're in. So we're in the Laminar Research, Cessna 172, and remember this is in plugins XLUA, and under scripts. Now these are all the ones that are already in there. Now we need to make a new one, right? We got to name it the same thing we named the Lua file. So I can right click in here and hit new folder. Let's call this door init, right? Door initialization or whatever. You can call it whatever. And then I want to make sure I type that the same way, door init, right? And I want to save it inside the door init folder, so save, right? Now when I push play, it says can't start the debugging, right, for door init.lua, and then it says down here, end expected to close the function at line 16, right? Because I didn't put, remember I took the end away. So at line 16, there's a function, and the end is not there, so I want to make sure I type in end, right? Say I type in end twice, there's two ends, right? I push play. Can't do the deal because line 21 EOF expected near end. That means there's too many ends, right? So line 21. So it's just got a debugger. So if I push play, this is what it should look like when things are right. So there's like 3 lines of code or 3 lines of like debugging and nothing that's like red highlighted or pink highlighted. Then you should be good to go. Now, Zero Brain doesn't know anything about, so if you push stop, there's another play down here, right here. This will try to run your program in the scratch pad, but it can. If I push run, it'll say execution error because it doesn't know what the global find dataref means. That's because this is not pure Lua, this is XLUA, so it's got things that are meant only for X planes, such as find dataref. So you can't really run it in that, but you could push play, and as long as it doesn't, when you push the normal play, it's just looking for, standard Lua errors, like if you got a syntax error, right? So you can push stop because it's debugging. When you push play, it saves it, and then it starts debugging. So I can go into Xplane now and close that. I can get into my cockpit. And now if I hit developer reload the aircraft and art, it's going to take into account this new Lua file that's in there. And it's going to pop me up. And now, a couple things are happening here. First of all, it popped me out here exactly where I wanted to go, but it had me looking forward. Why? Because it put my head position there, but I didn't actually tell it which way I want my head to turn. My shoulders are facing forward, but I actually want to turn my nose this way, right? There's a dataref for that. So let me go back into the dataref tool, we'll find that. And it was under some graphics view. Okay. Let's see. Head. Some graphics view. So it's not cockpit roll. It's actually head. Side. There you go. Okay. Alright. So you've got pilot's head, PHI, PSI, and THE, right? PSI is your nose left and right. THE is looking up and down. And PHI is actually like tilt. So if you tilted your left ear to your left shoulder, that would be PHI. But PSI is what we want. And when we're looking this way, looks like PSI is at 3940 actually. So we'll take that dataref. We're going to add that to the mix. I'm going to temporarily put that there. Copy this guy. Paste him here. Cut by hitting Control X to make that disappear. Control V. And let me shut this down so you don't have to hear that. Alright. Hello. Stubborn. Alright. So that's that, and we want to call this pilot head PSI. Right. I'm gonna copy, paste that, equals 40. Now, save it, and jump back into Xplane, developer reload. Now, that's perfect. Starts out just like that. Now, what I don't like is that it's unrealistic to start that way if the engine is on, right? You're not going to be outside the aircraft looking at it while the engine's on. So we only want to start like that if the engine is off, so if we're starting cold and dark, right? So you remember that one that I grabbed from over here is if startup was running, right? Let's go ahead and grab that dude. This is basically going to define whether it's cold and dark. and we'll leave it startup running. That's a good enough name. Now we're going to add a conditional into this whole deal. Now what's a conditional? A conditional means if something is something, then do something else. So if the aircraft is cold and dark, then I want it to start up this way. So let's do that. So if startup running equals equals. Now equals equals means does currently equal, or is currently equal to, or is currently reading. So if startup running equals equals 0, that means your aircraft equals equals cold and dark. Now what equals means set it to this. So if I say door open equals 1, that means I want you to open the door. If it said door open equals equals 1, that's just saying read it, and if it equals equals 1, then I want you to do something with it, right? So equals equals is like, does it read this? So if startup running equals equals 0, so if it's cold and dark, then anytime you do an if, you have to have a then on it. So if then. So if startup running equals 0, which means if it's cold and dark, then do all these things, right? Now if I clicked save and I clicked play, it's going to give me an error, and I'll show you why. It says right here, end expected to close function at line 19. Well, wait a second, we have an end closing the function. Yeah, but this end right now is closing this if. So anytime you have an if statement, or anytime you have any kind of statement that's a conditional, it has to have an end on the end of it, and a function has to have an end on the end of it. That's why I indent this, because this end right here is for this function in my eyes, because it's the same indentation. But there's no end for this if, right? So I'm going to hit enter and type in end. And now I'm going to save it, push play, check it out. I got no red lines. I'm going to come in here. I'm going to, we're going to start with engines running. We're going to leave it that way. And let's change locations just to give me a good full start with engines running. So now we have that should have started up normal. Let's see. Let me switch aircraft real quick and then go back into it. Sometimes it gets confused, or I may have my programming wrong, but I think it's just confused. Let's go back in here. Yeah, there we go. It got confused. So right now, if startup running equals 1, which is what's happening, I'm starting up with it running, it's not actually going to load me like that. But if I come back here and I make it start cold and dark, and I change the location to give me a good start new flight, there it is. Starts me off just like that, right? Perfect. Now, one more quick thing. Say we want to go ahead and start with the engine running, change the location, real quick, back to here. Now, say we have the door open, right? And push pause. Say we have the door open and we want that door to automatically close if we leave it open, if we are faster than 15 miles an hour, right? Something like that, something goofy like that, right? So we can come in here and we do that in what's called the after physics bucket, right? The after physics function. So it's after physics and then open close parentheses. So if, and we'll call it aircraft speed is greater than or equal to 15, knots. Then door open equals 0, which means we want to close the door, right? Then we end the if, and then we end the function. Now, what is aircraft speed? We got to get that dataref, right? So I can come in here, I can unpause it, get myself going, take my parking brake off. I'm going to pause it, and I'm going to open up datareftool. And I can look here, and I could search through here, or I could tell you, I wrote this down, flight model position indicated airspeed. So if I go to sim, flight model position indicated airspeed, that's the one, and I can unpause it just to verify. See how it's going up. So that's definitely it. So I'll take that and I'll highlight it and just paste it up in here somewhere. By the way, you know, you can do the same thing by coming in here and searching, and you could find, you got to search through several of these, but like indicated airspeed, knots pilot, knots co-pilot, all these different ones, and most of these will work the same way for this particular function. So that's it. So I'm going to take this dataref definition up here, add another thing to the pot here. We're going to call this aircraft speed, and this is going to be the dataref for it. Right, I'm going to save it. I'm going to push play just to make sure we're good. We're good. Push stop. Come in here, and I'm going to developer reload the aircraft. All right, unpause it. And I want to open the door. We'll get this thing going. And it should close the door at 15 miles an hour. There it is. And just probably blew some cylinders. Okay, so there you go, and that's pretty much how it works. Don't forget to put the folders in the way they should be. Have them named. Have the Lua file named exactly what the folder is. Now, if you want to add an XLUA folder to any airplane, you could do the same thing. You could go into any of the laminar aircraft. They all have XLUA folders in their plugin thing. And so, like say if I go into the Wherein, for example, and plugins, there's XLUA scripts. I could take and I could just delete these scripts, put my own in there for any aircraft I want. Take this entire plugins folder. Or if the aircraft you're working on already has a plugins folder but doesn't have an XLUA folder in it, just take this XLUA folder, drop it in the other aircraft's plugins folder, and then it'll work. You could drop this XLUA. All it has to have the 64, has to have the init in it, and then it has to have a scripts folder. It has to have these three things in it, and underneath the scripts folder you can put your stuff, and it'll work on any airplane as long as you're, or you know, any aircraft, as long as you're working with that aircraft's datarefs. And datareftool does a great job of parsing the custom datarefs for different aircraft. This tip of the iceberg, guys. There's commands we could work with. There's datarefs we could create. We create our own datarefs. We create our own commands. We can program some persistence into this. So if I leave the mixture like halfway, and I get out of the aircraft, next time I get back into it, it would start up in the same position you left it. You could do all kinds of things. You could have different sounds play at different events, and then you can even do like what I've done with the 412 for X-Trident. You could program menus, custom menus that work in VR. So like the 412 had a bunch of menus that you need to do different things like the sling loading and all the different things you need to do in those menus, but none of them are VR capable. Well, I just made my own menu out of a VR graphical user interface, all using Lua based things. So for that particular thing, I use Fly with Lua. I've used SASL. I've used for persistence, and XLUA I use a lot for like switches and like lighter scripting such as this, and for command creation. So the great thing about XLUA is it's super fast and it's super quick and super lightweight. It's really low level, which means it's really close to C++ as far as performance goes. The bad thing about it is it doesn't have very many debugging capabilities. So outside the debugging that Zero Brain does, you don't get much debugging at all in the developer console, which is here. Nothing in here is going to show up whether your thing is working or not, and you don't get anything on the log.txt. There's no fly with Lua debug.txt, like there's no debug.txt at all. So in XLUA you kind of have to really pay attention to what you're doing, and a lot of trial and error. But when it works great, and that's a quick primer on how to get some stuff done under the hood. I hope you guys enjoy. We'll go into quite a bit more detail in other videos down the line. Thanks guys, talk soon.